Bulavinaka, I am Vijay Narayan. This is Fiji Village on record. The permanent stay order on the case of Fijian and British national Charlie charters by High Court Judge Justice Pita Bulamainaivalu can be described as a landmark ruling for the country. Charters was charged with 2 counts of aiding and abetting after allegedly helping a FICAC officer unlawfully publish confidential FICAC information. Now, Charters was stopped at Nadi International Airport on the morning of Saturday, 21st February 2026, driven down by FICAC officers to Suva, taken to the FICAC offices late in the night, held in custody on Saturday and Sunday, and then charged and presented in court on Monday, 23rd February. The judge ruled today that Charlie Charter's right to remain silent was violated by FICAC, Charter's right to freedom of speech, expression, thought, opinion, and publication under the Constitution, including not to divulge the sources of his journalistic information, was violated by FICAC. There was abuse of process by FICAC. The Commission's case on counts 1 and 2 of aiding and abetting against charters will inevitably or doomed to fail, and there is a conflict of interest with regard to count 2, the charge against charters. Justice Bulamainaivalu found that FICAC breached charters' right to remain silent, not to incriminate oneself, and consult a lawyer under the Constitution when the FICAC officers, whilst detaining charters at Nadi International Airport on 21st February, failed to properly caution charters and provide him the opportunity to consult a lawyer prior to interrogating him to divulge his journalistic sources. It was also ruled in court today that charters' right to remain silent under Section 13 of the Constitution must not be qualified by an incentive to divulge his sources of information to negate criminal charges. Charters had argued that FICAC officers had acted in bad faith and improperly when they initially offered to release him provided he divulges the sources of his journalistic information, and upon charters refusing to disclose, then coerced and subsequently charged him due to his refusal to divulge his sources of information. FICAC had argued otherwise in the case, that the FICAC officers had acted properly and in good faith. The judge said, having carefully considered the council's submissions on point and affidavits, the court found that charters has the right to freedom of speech, expression, thought, opinion, and publication under the 2013 Constitution of Fiji, and also not to divulge the sources of his journalistic information, and that right was therefore violated by FICAC. Charters had argued that the charges against him are in retaliation to Charters posting and publishing on his Facebook account information concerning FICAC, Lavi Rokoika's appointment and conduct as acting FICAC commissioner, her husband's access to FICAC premises, and appointment of a niece-in-law as legal officer in FICAC. FICAC argued otherwise, that Charters' right was not violated. Now, the issue of conflict of interest was also highlighted by Charters, where he argued that the particulars of count 2 mainly concern his report of Lavi Rokoika appointing her own niece-in-law, Ulamila Vakalalambure, as FICAC legal officer, thus being the subject of the publication and concurrently sanctioning the prosecution of Charlie Charters. Justice Bulamainaivalu said, having carefully considered all the evidence, the court concurs with Charters' contention on conflict of interest, which is also indicative of FICAC's failure to properly and thoroughly apply the test for prosecution regarding Charters' criminal matter. The judge found that the FICAC case against Charters will inevitably or foredoomed to fail because FICAC has failed to identify the person whom Charters allegedly aided and abetted. FICAC breached Charters' right to remain silent and not to self-incriminate. FICAC breached Charters' right to freedom of speech, expression, thought, opinion, and publication under the Constitution, and also not to divulge the sources of his journalistic information. Justice Bulamainaivalu said the test for prosecution is whether there is sufficient evidence, and if so, then whether it is in the public interest to prosecute and reasonable prospect of securing a conviction. He has also said that the court is of the view that based on the findings, FICAC has not properly and thoroughly applied the test for prosecution, but hastily filed the charges against Charlie Charters and at the same time breached Charters' constitutional rights, which are legitimate basis to even exclude other evidence which lacks which FICAC lacks. FICAC has 30 days to appeal the ruling. Stay with us for more. For Fiji Village News, I'm Vijay Narayan.